So another thing, one of those many balances people have to navigate and doulas have to navigate in birth is people's response to stress and why it's so hard for people to speak for themselves. And sometimes it's really even hard for people just to make choices. So Karen and I are going to look at the stress response, and everybody knows about fight, flight, or freeze. You know, we picture some situation where there's a sudden, probably intense stress, and we know fight, flight, or freeze. There's a deeper stress response called tend and befriend, and that's where our survival depends more on banding together and being nice and taking care of each other. And then there's even a deeper stress response that Karen's going to talk about called fawn. So with tend and befriend, if you imagine back to like caveman days, paleo days, if there was the young, healthy people would be out hunting. And if they were threatened, they would fight, flight, or freeze. Their survival depended on that. Well, meanwhile, back at the cave, if there was some kind of a threat or a situation, people's survival depended on taking care of each other. Because who's back at the cave? The moms, the pregnant people, the older people, the children, and they need to band together to take care of each other. They can't just run away and leave everybody else. And we have seen that like so often in the birth room, where someone was really well prepared and say they said, oh, I'm not doing that thing. And maybe they said, I have a sore back, I'm not going to lay on my back. And then the first person who walks into the room says, okay, lay on your back. And they just do. And I mean, that's great if they felt good doing it, but sometimes they're doing things like that just because they actually don't feel comfortable speaking up, because they're in this response. We see this response when people, often when their child's safety is involved. It happens more to women, and we think that's more because of socialization than some actual physiology. It does also happen to men, but mostly it happens to women. And we just see it so often in the birth room. So Karen, you brought up the fawn response, which explains a lot, actually.
Yeah, so the fawn response is a stress, is a trauma response. So it falls into the category of a response for someone who has experienced trauma. It can be in other aspects of their life or within the institution or the setting that they're giving birth in, or within a previous birth experience, or of course, any experience they've gone through with in their bodies. So it's called fawn. And like the freeze or the mounts, so it's different from it has a different nuance than the freeze or the tend and befriend. But as doulas, we can modulate our support of our clients, knowing the possibility of the various stress or trauma responses to various situations. So we have our training and our experience and our intuition, our knowledge of the birth setting, those antennas out. And so fight, flight, freeze, tend and befriend, and fawn could be it's a good series of filters to view the way that our client may respond to a question, a suggestion, an action, or something that occurs within the room. So as doulas, we can really help with things. So fawn would look, it would look like just like the deer. So it's coined from, the adult deer. The fawn has camouflage camouflage fur. Yeah, and so it's just hiding. It's a, we're not expecting the fawn to do anything at all. Just go into a ball, hide, and they are simply incapable. And so the reading that I was doing on it was so interesting because what I learned is the capacity of my client. They have no capacity to speak, act, or stand up for themselves because of the trauma response. So you will notice it in their in facial expression, a very as if they're a very passive demeanor. And I find it quite alarming when I was reading about it, that if I was reflecting back on births that I've been at, how often that might have been the case. And we're understanding so much more about trauma now in our culture and acknowledging it. And as doulas, I think we should really bring that into our toolkit, the way that we can prepare the clients and the way that we can assist them in the birth setting.
I think a difference with the freeze response or the fawn response would be the freeze response would be almost more of a choice. Like freeze might be if someone says, okay, thank you for the information. I want a few minutes to think about that. That's kind of like putting everything on pause. And I mean, probably the person's a little stressed because they might have choices to make, and that often feels scary in the birth room. But the fawn, it sounds like it's not a choice. It's like just such a deep stress response, a deep trauma response where they're just frozen without asking for a pause. They're just frozen because they can't even ask for a pause. Yeah. So the way, like, we could think of some situations we've seen in the birth room. Because didn't you have a client who actually said, I'm leaving? Like, talk about flight. You did, right? You had someone who was like walking down the hall.
Oh, she ran down the hall. And she was 8 or 9 centimeters dilated. So yeah, we've seen the fight response, but the flight response, it's completely possible. And she simply left the birth room. And yeah, she was having a conflict with one of the care providers. And in that case, it just so happened that the charge nurse was coming out of her office as I was following my client down the hall. I don't know if she knew where she was going, but she knew that she was going. She didn't care where. So that's when the kind of that back part of the brain. So yeah, that's definitely possible. And so we, the charge nurse and I facilitated things coming back into a regulated state. And yeah.
Yeah. And I saw, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you were going to tell a story.
Oh, just I saw a fight one time. The client was actually, they had previous trauma related to a birth, and this was the dad in the couple I was working with, and he was all about fight, fight, fight. Everyone who walked in the room, it was really a fight, and my role became just helping him. Without negating his worries and what he was saying, but just helping him actually find tools to be able to communicate with the staff in a way that was mutually respectful. And they were actually like trying to give them what they wanted. They weren't asking for anything unreasonable, but he was so activated that everything was a fight and a battle. And it wasn't until he could sort of come down from that where then he was able to communicate effectively with the staff. And in the meantime, his partner, the laboring woman, was just doing her thing, and she ended up really rocking her birth. But somehow they managed to keep her in her bubble out of the conflict that was going on. So that's an example of fight. We had fight, we had flight, and freeze, I think, would be when people either feel a little overwhelmed to ask questions, or they actually ask for time so they can freeze and pause things for a bit. And then, I mean,
Well,
tend and befriend, we see that all the time, right?
yes, and the fawn response can look like the client is trying to actually please the person, because it doesn't seem like they're scared, but it's coming from a place of deep fear, and so they're trying to please and appease, so that because they're afraid of there's something happening, there's a message there from the past, and so they go into a real pleasing mode. And so as doulas, what we can do, if there's a sense that there can be some time, is we can see if the client wants a few minutes just to collect their thoughts and to make sure that they don't have any questions about things. So we prepare them for this prenatally by saying, if we ask you, do you have any questions? Sometimes that means, do you have any questions that you'll probably come up with if the room gets quiet and it's just you and I, or you and I and your partner in the room, and you can down regulate, kind of come into a sense of, as much of a sense of safe space as is possible, and then do a reset. So I've definitely done that scores of times. Just gave, or we suggest the client might take a break to go to the washroom, or have a walk, or go and spend some time in the pool or in the tub, where there would be less other energies in the room. And often you can ask for a break, a couple of minutes or even longer, before the decision is made or the consent is given.
This is where I think birth plans are really helpful too. If someone has something really specific, and because I know we've both seen times where when people were alone or they were in the bath and we were chatting with them, they were really comfortable saying what they wanted and what they needed. And then as soon as staff came back in the room, and that's not a reflection of the staff can be lovely and kind and gentle, but they're still staff, I guess. And then, our client stopped talking again. And so that's when it really helps to say, oh, they covered this in the birth plan. Because when I've seen someone come in and say, oh, I read the birth plan, and I know this is what you want, and it could be a thing like, let's turn down the sound on the monitor, or I had a client once who had to wear her fuzzy purple socks. I like that example because it's kind of neutral. It doesn't imply anything about interventions or anything. She had a scar, and she was so worried about someone seeing the scar on her foot. And it just brought her so much comfort when the staff said, oh, I like your socks, and we know you want those left on for your whole birth. And then she was just like, because we never know what people are going to worry about. It's not up to us to decide what's an ideal birth. It's up to our clients to decide what their ideal birth is. And we've had so many interesting requests. One of the births I was at, I had to sit and hold a rose quartz. Another birth I was at, probably within the same couple months, I had to make sure my client could see a picture of the Virgin Mary that she had brought, and she wanted to always be able to see that. And then there's the purple socks, and I know you have lots of stories about interesting things that you've been asked to watch for at births as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just the value again of those prenatal conversations, right?
Mhm.
When you've established the relationship with your client and you're a safe listener, and she can talk, she can ask about the purple socks, right? And especially if their journey before the birth that they're expecting has been a full life experience with some things that they didn't expect, or some trauma or disappointment, or where their expectations were definitely not met, then they bring all that into the labor room. And so it really is unrealistic to expect the client, who's hopefully mind and body are coursing with the hormones of labor, to come out of that process and into the clarity of decision making. It's just a shame that that has to happen. Like so many other things, we do it, and we manage, and the staff and the support teams within the birth settings are amazing and wonderful, but we're mammals, and so we're subject to hormones, and we're subject to the limitations that hormones and experience bring.
Mm. And we know people can have a trauma response that's completely unrelated to birth or any kind of sexual assault or anything. We're learning more and more. I love all the research that's coming out on trauma now. It helps everybody who's involved with, especially people going through such an intimate thing. It's really interesting to find out all the different ways, the different things people bring in. So I love that there's more awareness of that coming out now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just helping our clients find their voice and helping everybody hopefully have a better experience because they have someone who's helping cheer them on to speak up, helping them find their words. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else to add?
Well, it's all the stuff that we're learning and reading about, it just reaffirms that having a trusted female presence with you, having a doula with you, companioning you through the process, makes a huge difference, just a huge difference in terms of a sense of agency and safety, and that space that we create with our client.
Thank you. That's a nice way to end this little morning musing. So we're Angie and Karen from Birthways International. We are master doulas, we train doulas, we teach childbirth ed classes, and we love our work. So thank you for watching.
Thanks.